In her book, she says the White House was broken. This after 2 years along a president who wasn't housebroken. But she only realized this after she stopped getting paid to defend it. But like Jake Tapper's book, it's a new genre of Biden tell-alls that should be subtitled, "I had no idea because I'm severely retarded."
Karine Jean-Pierre walked in calm, binder ready, confidence on full display. But the second Greg Gutfeld and Megyn Kelly stepped into the room, the energy completely shifted. Greg kept the pressure coming with nonstop sharp humor, while Megyn challenged every response with relentless precision. Karine tried to hold steady, but the tense back and forth quickly turned into a chaotic and unforgettable showdown that had the entire room on edge.
The Megyn Kellys of the world, who have literally voted until this last election, which put me over the edge on voting more for Republicans. But literally now I voted in 9 presidential elections. God, I'm getting old. And I voted, it was 4 and 4 Dems, 4 Republican votes up until I voted for Trump again this last time. So it was 5 Republicans, 4 Dems. I've been a registered Democrat. I've been a registered Republican. And now I've been a registered independent for 17 years. That's what an actual political independent looks like. Not like somebody who worked for 2 Democrat administrations until they got the stank of desperation all over them. And she ran for the hills trying to pretend she knows what independent.
If press briefing showdowns were an Olympic event, Greg Gutfeld and Megyn Kelly would be taking home gold medals every year. This time, their spotlight landed on Karine Jean-Pierre, whose strategy for handling tough questions seemed to be avoiding them altogether. Instead of giving direct answers, she kept tossing questions back to reporters, hoping the pressure would fade away. But with Greg's rapid-fire humor and Megyn's sharp follow-ups, every dodge became impossible to ignore, turning the briefing into a tense, chaotic, and unforgettable media clash.
Applications you gotta fill out.
That's the thing.
Would you think I meant vaginas?
Oh.
Ew. Disgusting people. But now everyone says she's incompetent and lazy. You know, after they called me racist for saying that. That's not why I'm racist.
Nope.
If you're enjoying this intense political debate and sharp commentary, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe for more updates. What was supposed to be a routine White House press briefing quickly turned into a dramatic and highly talked about exchange, filled with tough questions, awkward moments, and non-stop reactions from the audience. Greg Gutfeld, widely known for his sharp political humor, delivered relentless commentary throughout the discussion, keeping the atmosphere tense and entertaining at the same time. The crowd reacted strongly to the unexpected back and forth, with many viewers finding the entire situation impossible to ignore.
But really, they're just jealous. These colleagues also played along with the hoax, saying that Joe was doing 75 one-arm push-ups while finishing the New York Times crossword puzzle all before breakfast. They're just pissed she beat them to the publisher's office and to the bank. I expect to see more of these books because of the lifeboats these rats will use to try and escape the shipwreck of the past 4 years. So KJP is now an independent because apparently pretending to be apolitical sells better than admitting your last job was gap.
Karine appeared visibly overwhelmed, struggling to keep pace as the intense questioning and rapid-fire exchanges continued throughout the briefing. Meanwhile, Greg Gutfeld leaned heavily into his trademark sarcasm and sharp humor, turning several awkward moments into highly entertaining commentary. The audience reacted strongly to the chaotic atmosphere, with every exchange adding even more energy to the room.
That's how bad the stink is when one of its worst offenders is fleeing this rancid armpit called the Democrat Party. So should we buy her book? Well, only if your family and friends have a sense of humor. It'll make a great gag gift. You know, like fake dog or rubber vomit. Only the stench here.
While Greg Gutfeld brought nonstop sarcasm and high-energy commentary to the discussion, Megyn Kelly took a far more calm and calculated approach. Without raising her voice or creating unnecessary drama, she focused on detailed follow-up questions and carefully challenged several of Karine's responses. Her composed delivery and sharp analysis added another layer of intensity to the exchange, making the entire briefing feel even more dramatic and closely scrutinized.
And her fans are already sharpening their crayons. And it's just what we need, a tell-all from the woman who spent 2 years telling everyone that Joe just had a cold and not rigor mortis. If the title hadn't already been taken, it should be called Art of the Steal. KJP also says she's leaving the Democratic Party. I say God bless her. Not many people have the patience to wait in a line that long.
Megyn Kelly carefully analyzed Karine's responses throughout the briefing, arguing that many of the answers sounded overly scripted and lacking in clarity. Her sharp observations and calm delivery added even more pressure to an already tense exchange. Meanwhile, Greg Gutfeld responded with his signature comedic style after Karine discussed inflation in a way he considered overly casual. He leaned into a dramatic impression of the briefing's awkward pauses, repeated explanations, and long-winded responses, drawing loud reactions from the audience. One of his biggest jokes centered around how even the simplest questions seemed to turn into lengthy answers that never fully addressed the point, a moment that quickly became one of the most talked about parts of the exchange.
Jean-Pierre reinventing herself as an independent. This from, it's everywhere, but this is just from the New York Post write-up, that she claims she's no longer a Democrat. She's coming out with a book, a memoir, hyping, says the New York Post, a, quote, broken Biden administration. They go on to say that it's a tell-all she's working on now, and it's going to be a look inside. Independent is the name of it. A look inside a broken White House, outside the party lines, due in Hachette, which is publishing it, says Jean-Pierre did not come to her decision to be an independent light.
Megyn Kelly delivered her criticism in a calm, controlled, and highly polished way, carefully pointing out what she viewed as repetitive talking points and overly rehearsed responses during the briefing. She highlighted familiar phrases, often heard in press conferences, arguing that they had become predictable enough for audiences to instantly recognize them. Her composed style mixed sharp political commentary with dry humor, giving the segment a tone that was both analytical and entertaining. As the discussion continued, Greg Gutfeld pushed the satire even further with an exaggerated comedy bit that mocked the overall communication style of the briefing. One of the segment's most talked about moments featured a humorous skit involving a goldfish dressed as a mock press secretary replacement, which drew loud reactions and laughter from the audience. The combination of Greg's over-the-top comedy and Megyn's precise critiques turned the entire exchange into a viral-style political media moment packed with sarcasm, humor, and non-stop reactions.
In this book, she may focus her ire on figures aside from Biden. Quote, she has served 2 American presidents, Obama and Biden. She takes us through the 3 weeks that led to Biden's abandoning his bid for a second term and the betrayal by the Democrat Party that led to his decision. The tease goes, and she's going to regale us with a hard-hitting yet hopeful critique defining what it means to be part of the growing percentage of our fractured electorate that is independent. Why it can be worthwhile to carve a political space more loyal to personal beliefs than a party affiliation, and what questions you need to ask yourself to determine where you fit politically. You've got...
Greg Gutfeld then introduced a deliberately exaggerated comedy graphic that looked intentionally low budget, adding even more humor to the segment. The chart jokingly tracked how often Karine gave what he considered a direct answer, with the line staying almost completely flat for comedic effect. Small bumps on the graph were humorously labeled as rare moments where something unexpectedly clear slipped through, turning the visual itself into the joke. The audience reacted immediately, with many laughing at the over-the-top presentation, while others seemed stunned by how sharply the satire captured the mood of the discussion. The combination of exaggerated visuals, sarcasm, and crowd reactions made the segment feel less like a traditional political debate and more like a late-night comedy showdown.
Republicans hate her. She's not in any position to be a connector of our two-party system, and assuming she could be is just ego. It's so good. They're all ripping on her, some by name, saying how dumb she was, how she's a joke, and literally nobody's buying her ability to be an independent connector who somehow is going to heal the partisan breach. Stu, back to my original point when her soundbite was playing of how those were all.
Megyn Kelly opened the discussion with a calm but pointed comparison, joking that Karine's communication style felt like a GPS constantly recalculating, even when no clear direction had changed. She argued that many briefings seem to leave audiences more confused rather than informed, delivering the criticism with a composed and understated tone. Greg Gutfeld quickly added his trademark sarcasm, joking that question dodging had become an art form filled with long, tangled explanations that were difficult to follow. Megyn continued by suggesting that some of the responses sounded overly rehearsed and disconnected from the actual questions being asked. Greg later exaggerated Karine's familiar on-camera expressions for comedic effect, recreating what he described as the tense, frozen reactions seen during difficult moments in the briefing. Meanwhile, Megyn stayed calm and observant throughout the exchange, reacting with dry humor as the chaotic atmosphere unfolded around them. Together, their mix of satire, political commentary, and sharp delivery turned the segment into another highly talked about media moment.
You have to say goodbye to Karine Jean-Pierre. I'm sorry, guys, but she's going. It's like, this is the way it's going to, it's the one sadness of Trump winning because let's face it, we're going to miss her a little bit. I kind of missed her word salads. In fact, I'll start with the word salads just so you two will be feeling the pangs that I've been feeling. Here's a little montage of some of the best / worst of Karine Jean-Pierre at the podium.
It is hard for us to keep up with this president. What I see is a strong, resolute president. We're seeing these deep fakes. These manipulated videos.
By the way, used to make beer brewed here. It is used to make the brew beer in this refinery. Oh, Earth Riders, thanks to the Great Lakes.
Is there any possibility that the president would end up pardoning his son?
Greg Gutfeld leaned fully into satire, jokingly imagining Karine running a restaurant while delivering long, overly formal explanations instead of simple answers. In the comedy bit, even ordering appetizers turned into a complicated strategic briefing, with customers becoming increasingly confused by the endless explanations. The exaggerated scenario played into Greg's ongoing joke about overly complicated communication styles, drawing loud reactions from the audience. Meanwhile, Megyn Kelly added her own calm and cutting humor, imagining Karine trying to give directions to a lost tourist, but turning the conversation into a philosophical debate instead of offering a clear answer. The joke centered around how simple questions often seem to become unnecessarily complex discussions, leaving people even more confused than before. What made the exchange stand out was that neither Greg nor Megyn relied on shouting or dramatic outbursts. Their calm delivery, sharp timing, and steady sarcasm gave the entire segment an even stronger impact. Greg's comedy style remained loud, chaotic, and intentionally over the top, while Megyn balanced it with a more controlled and polished form of criticism, creating a mix of humor and commentary that kept the audience completely engaged.
She realizes she was carrying water for a man whose brain was as wet as his pants. Remember, this is the same broad who stared America in the face and said this.
Comments were made in that report about that, obviously about his memory that we don't believe lives in reality. 80's the new 40. Didn't you hear? He is as sharp as ever. They are cheap fakes video. They are done in bad faith. And it's not true, right? The president wasn't wandering.
Is anyone in the White House hiding information about the president's health or his ability to do the job day to day?
Absolutely not.
He's the president of the United States. I can't even keep up with him.
Yeah.
Megyn Kelly delivered her commentary with a calm, controlled intensity, relying on precise wording and measured tone rather than volume or theatrics. Her observations carried a sharp, analytical edge that made the critique feel more pointed, as she broke down the communication style being discussed with a steady, almost clinical focus. Greg Gutfeld, on the other hand, leaned fully into satire, suggesting the entire exchange almost felt like an experimental format where clarity took a backseat to confusion. He jokingly framed it as a kind of ongoing performance, where answers seemed intentionally layered and indirect, turning serious political moments into material for comedy. Megyn responded in a similarly restrained tone, adding that the overall style sometimes felt like a blend of formal briefing and surreal improvisation, where structure exists but rarely leads to direct conclusions. Together, their contrasting approaches, his chaotic humor and her composed analysis, turned the segment into a sharp mix of satire and commentary, keeping the tone critical but theatrically engaging throughout.
I don't have anything. I don't have anything. I don't have anything. I don't have anything. I just don't have anything. I don't have anything. We don't have anything.
Okay, we could have kept going, because let's not forget when he thought that the dead congresswoman was alive. Where's Jackie? She was just top of mind. She was top of mind. And that's what Karine Jean-Pierre tried to tell us. And the obsessive note reading, right? She could not do the job without reading for the first 2 years of it. She got a little better on that.
Megyn Kelly reviewed the segment with her usual calm, analytical tone, focusing on what she described as the most notable moments from the exchange. Her delivery remained composed and precise, emphasizing the gap between expectation and performance in a way that felt sharp without being loud or emotional. Greg Gutfeld leaned fully into satire during his wrap-up, framing the entire briefing as a comedic montage of awkward pauses and exaggerated reactions. His humor highlighted the most uncomfortable moments for comedic effect, turning them into a fast-paced parody sequence that resonated strongly with the audience's reactions. Megyn added a final remark delivered with a controlled, pointed smile, reinforcing her critical stance in a subtle but impactful way. The overall tone of the segment blended commentary and satire, with Greg driving the humor and Megyn delivering measured critique, creating a sharp, entertainment-heavy breakdown of a politically charged moment.
What she's referring to, Link, is the fact that she's black and she's a lesbian. Like, this is what the left celebrates. That's her history-making role that she hopes everybody will find inspirational. Like lesbian children were growing up all over the country thinking, I'm never going to be press secretary because I'm a lesbian. I mean, it's just so. What are we in?
In the end, it didn't feel like a heated political clash at all. It played more like a polished comedy dinner where the formal structure slowly dissolved into satire. Karine Jean-Pierre ended up at the center of it all, meant to guide the conversation, but instead becoming the focus of the jokes. Greg Gutfeld and Megyn Kelly weren't operating with anger or aggression. They relied on timing, wit, and sharp observation. Greg leaned into humor and exaggeration, while Megyn delivered calm, precise commentary that cut quietly but clearly through the moment. By the end of the segment, the audience reaction was less about disagreement and more about shared disbelief at how the exchange unfolded. It became one of those moments where commentary, satire, and real-time reactions blurred together into pure entertainment. And through it all, the tone stayed surprisingly controlled. No shouting, no chaos, just humor and critique delivered with a steady hand.